Welcome back to the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. This is episode 91. Today, I had the honor of sitting down with my friend Travis Howze. Travis is a former Marine, police officer, and firefighter, as well as the author of the best-selling book and host of the top-ranked podcast, both entitled Create Your Own Light. Travis and I had a wonderful conversation about trauma and how if we're not careful, we can bring that trauma home and expose our family, creating collateral damage. I really hope you enjoy this episode. As always, please leave us a rating and share this with someone you know that would enjoy it. Have a great day. Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive. Listeners, welcome back to another episode of the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast, where I am joined today by my friend, Travis Howze. Please say hello to the listeners.
Hello to the listeners. How's everybody doing?
I think they're doing great, Travis. I
think so.
I wish they could talk back to me sometimes, but maybe it's not good if they did talk back.
Yeah, it's that's why I enjoy doing my podcast. I just get to sit there and talk to myself. And I don't do guests, as you know, so it's just me.
I know. And I did some solo episodes, but I think my guest episodes are more popular. Before we get too far into the weeds with questions, Travis, I want to revisit. You and I had shared some fellowship and a lunch not too long ago when you were visiting the greater Chicagoland area. What was that place called that we went to?
I don't know. I just remember the butter dipping sauce.
Yes, that's what I wanted to talk about.
Is that where you were going?
Yes, we wanted to talk about the butter dipping sauce. People, I can't remember what this restaurant's called, but it's a Mexican restaurant. We had these fajitas and they brought us this vat. I was like, what is this? And Travis was like, I don't know. What do you think it is? So we tried it. Garlic butter.
It looked like a little shot glass margarita in a sense. It was in a dipping cup. If they had put salt in there, that's what I thought. I would have drank it. I would have continued drinking it. That's how delicious it was.
Well, I actually just want to go back to the restaurant and order up like a 5-gallon bucket of that. Are you in? You want to split a 5-gallon bucket if I am able to make that happen?
Possibly.
Possibly. All right.
If I don't want to live long.
I know it's probably not good for your heart, but It was delicious. Well, before we get too far into the podcast, I don't read bios and I don't, do these big introductions. Travis and I already talked about video. We both think video is horseshit, so there's no video. But I want you to introduce yourself to the listeners, and that's with a simple question. Who is Travis Howze?
Oh man, that's a great question because at 45 years old, I'm still trying to figure it out myself. Who this guy is, this man of much mystery and many hats. So, I guess I'll go back a little ways. My background consisted I was a Marine Corps infantry guy, and then I got out and I was a police officer for a little while, and then after that, when I stayed in the police department, I crossed over to being a firefighter, and I spent a total of 14 and a half years in total service. And after I got out of the services in 2010, I went on the road, and now I'm a full-time motivational educator where I won't want to say specialized, but I talk about mental wellness and the family dynamic and how it affects our careers, our longevity with family, and our overall growth as human beings.
And I think you glossed over one spot, Travis, because you were a comedian for a number of years, right?
You caught that, didn't you?
I did. I caught it.
So that's I was actually a professional stand-up comedian for 14 years. I traveled the world doing that. I worked with many of the household names that you see out there today. I wasn't a household name. I was a guy that worked with a bunch of them. And it was a fun time. And the reason that I left that out was because, I started off with, I think, my age of being 45, and people are probably on the other end of this with a calculator. They're like, how is this even possible doing all these things by the time you're age 45? So just for simplicity's sake, I left that out. But my life has been full throttle ever since, I was born, and I've tried to squeeze as much life into this as I can. I've been pretty fortunate and blessed to do that.
You know what? When I met you and you told me your story, I remember I was on the treadmill. Our friend Michelle, mutual friend, introduced us. And so I was on my treadmill at home, and Travis was kind of telling his story. And I was like, how has he possibly fit all of this into it, because this was now 5 or 6 years ago, into his
Yeah.
40-year-old life. How is this possible? I don't know. Full throttle. That's the answer.
Well, the thing, and like, look at our life and look how much time we have during the day and look how much time we spend wasting on just bullshit. And when you cut a lot of that bullshit out and you leave room for productivity, because human beings, we can be massively productive, massively. And I think that's what I did at an early age. I think when I look back at it, because trust me, I sit here, I'm in my office, I'm writing my second book right now, and I'm writing this, and I'm like, how in the hell have I done all this in my life? And then I look back, and I'm like, I didn't spend a lot of time sitting on the couch. I didn't spend a lot of time relaxing on the beach, and you're not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm not a relaxer. I'm a doer, and I'm just like it's driving me crazy sitting here right now. I'm glad to be with you, but I need to be out doing something. And I think that's why I got a lot of go in me.
Which it makes sense and it follows for how you've lived your life. Next question, Travis. What sets your soul on fire?
Whew. So me, honestly, I want to go back to my comedic days, and I had a really good comeback for that, and it was highly inappropriate. Not dirty, but it's just inappropriate. So I'm not going to go there because
Thank you.
No,
This is not a PG show by any means, but I'm scared of what you were going to say.
No, it was a movie quote that actually just follows that, but I'm not going to go. What sets my soul on fire, honestly, at this point in my life, it's purpose. And it's if I don't feel that sense of purpose, I feel that my soul is being extinguished. And so to keep that fire burning, I'm constantly chasing that purpose. And what I mean is, I don't just do my purpose and live my purpose, I do it to the best of my ability every day. So when my feet hit the floor, I know what my purpose is today. I'm going after it. And I'm not going to get back in that bed. And I'm not going to sit down until I'm one, proud of the work that I put in, chasing that purpose. I think that's it for me. Like, I have people all the time. They're like, "Dude, you can't relax," and they say that like it's a bad thing. And it's like, look, just because I'm not like you doesn't necessarily make it bad. But this is what fuels me. I love speaking about uncomfortable things. I love getting in here and writing in my book. Like this morning, I'm writing a chapter on my grandfather, and he was not a pleasant man at all. And the chapter is called Roots of Trauma. And what it's doing, it's addressing secondary traumatic exposure and how you pretty much expose your lineage and your bloodline to all of the bullshit that you've experienced if you're not careful. My grandfather essentially exposed my daughters, his great granddaughters, who he never met, to all of his bullshit because of just like trickle down economics. It's trickle down trauma. And it starts trickling down through the roots, through the family roots. And before you know it, my dad has a lot of my grandfather. I have a lot of my dad, and my girls have a lot of me. They also have the good qualities, but I promise you, I can look at them and I can trace it back to where it came from. And I love writing about that. And as I'm learning and I'm in the writing process, I called my father this morning. I said, Dad, I need you to listen to these 3 paragraphs. And I did this because my father and I are extremely close. If anybody read my first book, I talked extensively about my father and our connection and our relationship. Now, my father was a hard man, but I wanted him to hear what I had to say about his father. And Annette, I only had 3 paragraphs, and I was bawling reading, and I'm actually kind of choking up a little bit now. We're just thinking about that from 2 hours ago. And it was so special to me to write what was extremely hard to hear. And I think it's just going to be a powerful, moving book. I saw this, my wife sent me this thing. It says, if you want to write a good book, write things here. I have to pull this up because it's kind of complex. If you got 2 seconds, because we're on to something here now. Hang on. It goes, if you want to write a good book, write what you don't want others to know about you. If you want to write a great book, write about what you don't want to know about yourself. And that was so powerful because what I'm getting at is before she even sent me that, I'm writing another chapter in there that talks about the monster that I became. That is literally the title of the chapter. And I'm talking about some very embarrassing, uncomfortable things that most people hide from everybody. that they don't want anybody to know. And they even hide it from themselves, and they lie to themselves. And I blow the doors off this chapter with like, hey man, this is who I was. This is the father I was becoming. And guess where I can trace it all back to? My my grandpa DC. And I don't use that as an excuse. I use it because I got some of it from my dad. And the beautiful thing is I got a lot from my mother, and I got a lot from my grandmother. My grandfather didn't have any parents. They died when he was young. His father was murdered in prison. His mom died when he was 3. He had to drop out of elementary school and go work in logging camps as an 8, 9-year-old boy. And he grew up out there in logging camps, exposed to God knows what. And his best friend, who was his brother, was murdered. He ended up going to World War II, fighting Japanese. He was exposed to the atrocities in the Philippines. If nobody's familiar with that, in the Philippines, and during the liberation of the Philippines, soldiers were exposed to babies' heads on stakes, women that were gutted, raped, and just all these things that these men went through back then. And then he comes home and he tries his hand at being a father and being a husband, things he knew nothing about, things he never had a good mentor. He never got to see what that really looked like. And guess what he turned to when his struggles began? Alcohol. And in turn, that turned into abuse of every form of physical abuse, verbal abuse, mental abuse. Then he loses one of his daughters at an early age. She dies. He ends up getting shot in front of his family. He got shot in the throat in front of his daughters and his wife. He could no longer talk. So now he loses his ability to communicate with his own family, with just all humans. Then he catches cancer and is in his throat of all places. They have to take his larynx out. He could actually talk a little bit before that. Now he can't talk at all. So now he's reduced to written word, and he has a very minimal education, elementary education. So this man who's avoiding everything he's been through in life through alcohol, when he wants to communicate, the only way he knows how is through violence from the background he comes from, and through a 4th, 5th grade education, writing something on paper. There's more stuff than that. I mean, and it goes on, and the man has a laundry list of things that he was exposed to. And I look back and I'm just like, how can I sit back and judge a man like that? Because I don't think I could have made it through any of it and been sane. I don't make excuses for it, but what I'm trying to do, and I'm sorry to get long-winded because I know you have more questions.
You be as long-winded as you want, friend.
I'm trying to approach this from an understanding point of view versus a blaming point of view, because it's easy to sit back and say what a horrible man he was. It's easy to sit back and point fingers and say, men don't do that, men don't treat. And I'd be the first fucking person to tell you, like, yo, you treat your family like that, you need your ass whipped. You need your family taken away from you. You don't deserve them. Absolutely. But this man, I never saw any of that from them. I only saw kindness from my grandfather, so I'm biased. I didn't experience all of that because I saw him in his old age. I knew him in his old age. And by that time, it was too late. His family had already completely left him. He had nobody. He ended up dying in my father's home alone. He ended up losing his leg, by the way, all this stuff. And what I want to do is try to show other people through our bullshit who we end up becoming over time. And I'm using my grandfather as that unfortunate model. Do you want to end up like DC? Do you want to end up alone? Do you want to end up with nothing because you were so worried about being the tough guy or the tough girl? Because that's where it all leads. That's who I was. And that's why my career ended in the fire service, as you know, which we haven't talked about yet. I was too worried about being tough. I had a very tough reputation, and I needed to uphold that. And I was not one to take care of myself. And that's what led me to where I got to. And my grandfather was a mirror image of where my life was headed. So there's that.
Travis, I think what you're saying and admitting and talking about requires a huge, huge amount of vulnerability. Tell me, how did you get to a place where you could bare your soul like that?
So it wasn't easy by any means. Okay, dude, I have water in this cup. I didn't want to turn the faucet on.
You can turn the faucet off.
It's so loud. I'll tell you what happened in 2016. So when I was doing stand-up comedy, in 2016, I was invited to come down to South Florida and speak to 300 first responders about mental health and the impact that it takes on our personal lives and our careers. Because there was a gentleman down there who was trying to get started on introducing this to our industry. And so, me being a comedian and always being in front of crowds, I had no problem with speaking to people. So I was like, yep, I can do it. Let's go do it. But I didn't realize the level of vulnerability that it took. Honestly, I didn't understand vulnerability because it was a foreign concept to me. I was too busy. I was a tough guy, right? So fast forward to 2016, I'm on stage in South Florida in front of 300 first responders. And I get out there, no script, no nothing. I had no idea what I was going to talk about. About 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes in, I start bawling out of control. And I mean, I was crying like I was alone in my closet in the dark and nobody was watching. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that. I had boogers in my beard. I
Oh
had
dear.
waterfalls of snot running into my beard, and I couldn't stop it. It's like I had this I had something inside of me that needed to get out, and that was the place it happened for me. And when it did, what I saw happen, I was in fear of judgment, just like anybody. I was embarrassed. I was like, "Oh my gosh, like how do I come back from this?" And people are going to remember this way. Motherfuckers gave me a standing ovation, and I didn't understand what was happening, but something palpable was there. You could feel it. And I walked off stage. I was shaking, and this wasn't me. I mean, I just wasn't that kind. I'm not that kind of guy still. And some dudes came backstage and they hugged me, and they were afterwards. I walked out into the lobby. There were some very hard individuals out there with tears in their eyes who were hugging me and thanking me. So here's what happened to answer your question. I instantly saw a need for this. When I was doing comedy, we're going around, we're telling dick jokes all over the country, all over the world. Ha ha, this is great. This is funny. But when we left those events, we were either on a plane, on a bus, in a rental car, and we were gone. Maybe somebody said, nice show, great show. They laughed, they went home, and either they had so much fun, it created a nice romantic mood for a couple, or maybe we talked a little too close to home about certain things and it created fights for couples. I don't know. You never saw the results of anything. When I spoke about this for the first time, I saw instant results that I just can't explain to this day, the power behind it. So I realized right then I need to do this again. So that same individual invited me to Jacksonville, Florida. He had something going on with some the firefighter union down there and some other people. And he said, "Do you want to give it another shot?" And I said, "Absolutely." And that time I was ready. That time I went and I spoke for an hour and a half, just off the cuff about things. I still choked up. I still cried. Same exact reaction from the crowd, just only bigger as far as like the palpability of it. And I just knew. And so from then on, I started speaking more, and I was already writing a book, my book called Create Your Own Light. I started writing that, and then that ended up getting published in 2020. And when that book came out, there was not a single resource out there at the time that I'm aware of that spoke about this stuff on the level that I spoke about it, and from the vulnerability side, with the things that I'd been through, what I'd witnessed, what it did to me, how it impacted my family. I was still very guarded with my family. I didn't open up a whole lot about my family because, again, I wasn't there yet. I talked a lot about my comedy career, the highs and the lows of it, and I talked about what happened to me in my different services, and ultimately what led to my dismissal as a firefighter for not taking care of myself. Um, and that book was that. And then when it came out, I was asked to speak all over. And what was going on is I ended up canceling, or I didn't cancel, COVID canceled my full time comedy tour. But guess what didn't stop? First responders didn't stop going to calls, and they needed something. So I had departments slowly started contacting me when that book came out. Hey, can you come talk to us? Can you come talk to us? And it started out doing little 12, 13 people in a training session, and those small training sessions with the coffee pot dripping in the back. We started doing those, and before we knew it, man, it was just resonating with so many people. If you fast forward to today, we're doing events, 1,500, 2,000 people all around the country now, and it's just it's unimaginable seeing where it came from to see what it is today with Post Traumatic Purpose Tour, and I'm beyond proud of it.
I read the book. I loved the book, and I cannot wait for the next one. But you're right. You didn't talk too much about your family in that first book. And as first responders, many times our families end up being collateral damage when we have a bad spell at work, bad call, so on and so forth. Our families become collateral damage. What do you know now that could help first responders out there to keep their families from suffering along with them?
Oh my gosh. So, yeah, I was extremely guarded in that first book because I didn't know. I knew how to talk about me to an extent. I could get right to the line and then go into self preservation and protection mode and then make you wonder a little bit. Well, I've grown as a person so much since that time that this next book that I'm writing, I don't give a fuck about any of that. I really don't. I don't care what anybody thinks about the man that I became because I know who I am today. But I do know what I experienced, and I do know that so many others are experiencing it, men and women from these lines of work that we do. And I know that I have firsthand knowledge of this because I'm in front of thousands of first responders every year doing events all around the country, and I get the feedback from them. I can tell you, you're right on point. Collateral damage is an amazing word to use in that scenario. I use it in my second book. I think ultimately we do more damage to those around us than we do to our own selves because we're so accustomed to self preservation and protection that we'll do anything we can to make ourselves feel good, even if it means hurting other people in the process. And then we have this horrible ability to take ownership for the shitty things that we do to the people that we love. And what we do is we do a lot of finger pointing and a lot of excuse making. Well, I did this because you did that. You made me feel this way, etc. Versus saying, you know what? I'm absolutely wrong as a man. I'm absolutely wrong as a woman. I need to take ownership of my life because it's destroying everything that I love around me and all the people that I care about. And what about me can I fix that will hopefully reduce some of that collateral damage? And the hardest thing that I have found is pointing a finger at yourself. It's almost impossible for a human being to point the finger at themselves without making any excuses and just say, I was wrong, I'm wrong. And when you can do that, that's where growth really starts in its infancy. You're not going to see results that day. But the second you can stop making excuses for your bullshit, you start growing as a human. And then that in itself is so intoxicating. When you start feeling that growth and other people start seeing it, you want more of it because it's positive growth. And I got to a point where, man, I would own anything that I was going through, even if I wasn't wrong for it. I would take the blame for it because I'm like, fuck it, I can use this for growth to become a better man and a better husband and a better father and a better friend because I destroyed all of that. I was essentially my grandfather, I'm telling you. And I was fortunate enough at 11 years old to see him and see his life to where when I got to a point in mine, I saw that image of him and I realized exactly where I was heading. I was like, that scared the shit out of me. And I was like, whatever I got to do. So here we are.
It sounds like self-awareness is a big, big piece of that. And I know that there's people out there listening saying, cool, Travis, this is awesome, but I can't do that. A, I can't do that. I can't be that vulnerable. Or B, they don't know where they are. They don't have the self-awareness. How do we start creating that in ourselves? What did you have a process or was it an epiphany?
I was sitting in a truck with a gun in my lap and I was getting ready to shoot myself. This is after the first time that I did try to shoot myself and I failed at that. But the second time I was sitting there in that truck with a gun in my lap, I experienced, and you read about it in that first book, and I'm not going to get long winded on this, but um, yeah, I had an epiphany, and I experienced a little bit of joy right before I was about to do this, and I realized, hey man, there's still happiness out there. How do I get some more of this? And I realized the only way to get some more of this is to deal with your shit. And so I decided as a man to go ahead and start working on it. I was so proud of being a tough guy that I'd be willing to ruin a relationship with you as a person to be able to pound my chest and still prove that I'm a hard ass. That was the most important thing to me. And I don't know why. I think it was the culture we came from, the backgrounds I come from, and it was the upbringing that I had that taught me to be that way. I was never exposed to a whole lot of compassion. I was exposed to love. My family loved me, so I'm not saying that I was my grandfather in that sense, but it was hard love. So I wasn't one to be too sympathetic towards other people's needs. It was all about me, and it's all about how tough I could be. And if you're a person that says I can't do that, then you're making excuses. As shitty as that sounds, if you're listening to this and you're in the same boat as me and you're sitting there saying I can't do that, so what you're telling yourself is, but you can lose your family, you can lose your career, you can lose all the friendships you want, you can lose your retirement that you're working so hard for, because I did that too, and you can be alone at the end of your life with nothing. Now, which is easier? You got to choose that route. You know. To people that are not aware, I love that question, because as I'm writing my second book about my grandfather, that chapter, I don't think he was aware. I don't think he knew that he had mental health issues, because that wasn't talked about. Resources weren't available. It wasn't public knowledge. He was just a hard man, had a drinking problem, and he was an asshole. You know what I mean? And he just thought that, I think he was just in survival mode. And I think that's what a lot of us, unfortunately, we're in survival mode. And we don't realize who we really are. But if you stop for a minute and you look at your children, you look at your wife, you know if they're happy. You know if your family's happy. You know if people want you around. You know if you're getting invited to things, if you're welcome to things, and you know when you're not. And when you're not welcome to things like that, it's usually a pretty good indicator. You know what I've done? I did something that was really hard one time. I pulled both of my daughters to the side separately, and I asked them, I said, I want you to be honest with me. Are you a happy little girl, or are you sad? And fortunately for me, both of them said that they were happy. They had no idea why I was asking that. But I was asking that because I knew if they were unhappy, probably had a lot to do with me. And there's so much more work I needed to uncover and do on myself.
So you came to this realization, and I know there's listeners out there that are saying, "Oh, awesome, I'm going to come to this realization, and then I'm going to decide that my life is going to be different, and tomorrow it's going to be different." But I have a feeling this was quite a process, was it not? And what are some of those steps you took in that process to get you from that day to where you are today?
Well, you have to look at something like that as just the word growth. What does that mean? You're not the human being you are today that you were when you were first born. It took a long time to get to be who you are. So essentially, what you got to do is you got to recognize this is a part of growth. And it is nothing more than planting the seed and watering it and fertilizing it and trimming it and cultivating it and mulching it so it can have all the nutrients that it needs in order to thrive. You put a flower in a pot, you don't water it, you don't nurture it, you don't mulch it, you keep it in the shade, it's going to grow, it's going to die. You know, if it says it needs all day sunlight, but it gets filtered 2 hours a day sunlight, it might survive, but it's not going to thrive. Make sense?
Absolutely.
So I tell people, do not rush into thinking that you're going to wake up tomorrow and be a brand new version of yourself. But you can wake up tomorrow and feel a little bit better once you get all the bullshit out, aired with your family, because there's no avoiding it. You have to say I'm sorry's. You have to take ownership for a lot of stuff, even if you don't feel it's necessary. Do it. Tell people what they mean to you, and don't go back and behave the same old way that you always have. You actually have to change. And that's the hardest part. It's because we come so accustomed to being who we are. You know, You know as well as I do in these businesses, we have people, they're like, man, this is the way I am, and if people don't like it, fuck them, you know? And that's the worst mentality to have. I had that. And that's a self-preservation mentality. That's because you know something's not right with you, but you don't want to put the work in to be better. So you use that as a cowardly defense to protect yourself. I embrace the journey, and I encourage other people to do that as well. You may celebrate victories when nobody knows that you had a victory. And that's one of the hardest things to understand. I know sometimes, like if a trigger happens to me, I don't stop the whole family like, hey, trigger moment, let me work on it. I just work on it. And many times they don't even know that I just worked on something and I kept from diving off in everybody's ass. Mm-hmm. And when I can start doing that, hey, that's a victory. I high five myself on the inside. And you just slowly start growing, and you eventually end up in a place where those triggers, they don't affect you the same way. I tell people about hypervigilance. I teach about that. I think hypervigilance is a good thing and a horrible thing. One, it keeps us alive in the professions that we're in. You need it. Your head on a swivel. We work in dangerous atmospheres. The problem with that is when we come home, we're not in those dangerous atmospheres anymore, and it's hard to turn that off. And hypervigilance is no different than secondary traumatic exposure. You can affect your family with hypervigilance. You can make them fear the world that's out there the same way we do when we're out there working. And it's not the same. Yes, the world is a dangerous place, but it's not as dangerous as we make it because we work in it. We are there for most of our adult lives, and we see what most other people don't see. The real world, for most people, is sunshine and rainbows. For people like you and I, it is straight thunderstorms. You know, I've been out of service for 14 years now, and I've never seen one bad thing. I tell this in my course, Post Traumatic Purpose. I've been around the world 6 times in that time frame. I've never seen a bad thing ever. But I can go back to my old profession and walk into 3 homicides within 10 minutes because that's the atmosphere I choose to work in.
How did you learn to leave that hypervigilance at the door when you came home? Or maybe you never learned until afterwards.
That's a hard one. I still have that because, again, that's part of self-preservation too, and that's survival mode. I don't know that ever truly leaves your body. I still have forms of it, but not as severe as it used to be. So on TikTok, I was doing something one time, and it got under a lot of people's skin because I sat with my back to a door and I showed a video. I'm like, look what's happening. I'm sitting with my back to a door and nothing happened to us in here. We sat with my family. We had a good meal. And the context was lost, but everybody on TikTok wants to prove what a badass they are, especially a bunch of old, guys like me from the military and cops. They want to show you like how John Rambo they are, and they're like, I don't ever do that. My job as a father is not to have fun; it's to protect my family and at all cost. And I'm the lion, and I'm like, you motherfucker is what you're the reason your family's fucked up. When your kids see you not having fun and not being human, that's a problem. That is a major problem. I can sit in the middle of a room and be aware of what's going on around me. I don't have to be so hyper focused on the door that I can't be involved in conversations with the people that I care about. And that's what I'm trying to get at. We let these wonderful moments in time, we let them elude us because we're so hyper focused on something that's not going to happen. It is insane. And the things that they say towards me, these people that don't even know me, they have no idea where I come from, what I've been through. And so they're just ignorantly throwing stuff out there. But it makes me wonder how many families are fucked up because they have some dad that has something to prove, how John Rambo he is. Y'all go have fun while I sit here and don't. What kind of relationship is that?
I'm going to go with not very fun. At least that, not very fun.
Absolutely.
So I have a theory, and you can tell me to go jump off the cliff. But when I was reading about your career with the fire department and that you were also doing stand-up and that you were also running a limo company on your off days, I started to think, is Travis trying to make himself so busy that he doesn't feel anything? What do you think of my theory?
Go jump off a cliff
Tell me more.
with no water underneath.
Oh,
No, I'm
that's
kidding.
a severe one.
No, you're right. Like I say, listen, I'm an open book. I'm not ashamed of anything. I think in that I'm still like that. I think, I have a farm, and if I'm not here working on my book or doing something with my kids, I'm out at my farm cutting grass that I just cut 2 days prior, and I'm feeding cows that I just fed 5 minutes ago, and I'm mending fences. Yeah, I think me staying busy keeps my mind sane. And I did a post, and I actually did an episode on my podcast called Chaos is Calm and Calm is Chaos. For some people like us, we thrive in the chaotic moments, and the calm moments are the scariest for us, you know? And I find myself going absolutely crazy when I'm not busy. So, yes, with the limos back in the day, there's something else you dug up. Um,
Hey, I have a mind like a steel trap. Sometimes there's
yeah,
holes in it, but
yeah. No, I was running that limo company very successfully from the firehouse. We had 5 full-time limos, and uh, I would run it while I was on duty. All of my drivers were police officers or firefighters. So and this is back when limos were a real big thing before the economy crashed, by the way. Not so much anymore, but they were running full time around the clock all year back then in Charleston, South Carolina, and it was just a fun time. I was young. I was 27 years old, and I had a very thriving business that I had no business getting into in the first place. I never went to college. I did go to college for like 10 minutes. I was in a business intro to business class or something like that, and I was so dumb. I love telling this story. I'm actually telling this story in my book too. I barely got through high school. Okay. The only reason they squeaked me through is because they knew I was going in the Marines. They're like, all right, go. I couldn't even get into a local college here. The admissions girl felt so sorry for me. She wrote a letter on my behalf and actually wrote it as if I wrote it, and she submitted it, and they waived some of the shit to get me in. And I will never say her name because I don't want to blast her, but thank God for her, I would have never gotten in there. But when I was sitting in there was a man, and he was talking about intro to business, and I was already running a full-time limousine company, mind you. Okay, while I'm sitting in there, something about to the extent of he's never owned a business, but he has studied it, and this and that, and I sat there, I was like, wait, what the fuck did he just say? And I stood up and I started walking out. And he said, "Sir, where are you going?" And I was like, "Did you just say you've never owned a business?" He says, "That's correct. I've studied and I'm a professor." And I was like, "Shit, I want to learn from you." That's like wanting to learn how to drink from a man who's never been drunk. I want to learn how to quit drinking from the guy that's an alcoholic, not from the guy who's never taken a drink, right? And so I left, and shit, I had a successful business. That's where I learned all about like business taxes, corporate taxes, advertising, all this. Man, I mean, I was thrown to the wolves, and it was an interesting time.
I'm I'm dying. Well, you mentioned the farm, which I definitely wanted to ask you about, but you
Okay.
forgot a couple really important points about the farm. The first one is you just casually dug yourself a pond last summer,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Where did that come from?
The 2 acre pond I dug with a shovel. No, I'm kidding. Man, that's a guy that needs to be busy. No, so do you want the long version, or I mean,
Yes, I want the
okay,
whole version.
all right. Part of my journey to happiness was I was I owned some rental properties, okay, here in the Charleston area, and I was sitting at home and I was touring and everything was going great, but I was fucking miserable. Like I didn't have a place I could escape to, and I was literally in my house every day. I wouldn't go outside because I didn't want to see the neighbors. I grew up very country. I grew up way out in the country, and I started longing for that, and I started needing that. And then all of a sudden, I started watching fucking Yellowstone and that damn John Dutton, and he had a ranch. And I looked at my wife and I go, I could sell all these rental houses right now and go buy some fucking property and just get away from all of this. And she looked at me and goes, "But what about the income?" And I was like, "Fuck the income." I was like, I'm ready to live my life. I don't want to live to be an old man and sit on a pile of cash and just be miserable. So shit, we started a search for a farm, and we found one about 2 hours from here. I got it under contract, but it ended up falling through over some petty bullshit. And I was devastated. I was utterly devastated. And I thought it was never going to happen. Well, lo and behold, things happen so other things can happen, right? The silver lining thing. We found one an hour away from my doorstep in Charleston. So literally I can leave right now, go spend a couple hours there, feed my animals, come back for dinner time. That's what happened. We bought it, but here we go. It's a very large property, and it was majority pine trees, except for like maybe 3 acres where the house sat. And I didn't like that. I wanted pastures. I wanted horses and cattle and all these things. And I got out there one day. We closed on it in November of 2020 during the pandemic. I also did shit. I started spending money like that during the pandemic because I was like, fuck it, I'm ready to live. If we're all going to die of COVID, because, they were telling everybody they're going to die, I was like, I'm going to at least own this bitch for 2 weeks and know what it was like to die in a place I want to die. So we get to that place, and the only thing I bought was a chainsaw. And I asked the guy, I said, how long do you think this chainsaw will last? And he goes, well, cutting like one tree down every year, so, it'll last you a long time. I said, no, you don't understand. I'm about to go cut acres of trees. And he goes, oh, well, probably not too long. I went out there with a chainsaw and started dropping trees left and right. And I ended up personally hand clearing. You want to talk about a guy that just needed to get away? I personally hand cleared 30 acres on my own. And that's unheard of. I was out there at nighttime dropping trees. And that was in November. Come January of 21, my tractor arrived, and finally I had some help. So now I had lights on my tractor, and I'm dropping them in like at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm out there dropping trees. I don't give a fuck. And then I go and get some rest. We didn't have television at the house because there's a house out there, and I liked it because I could just go in. I wouldn't consume myself with garbage and absorb any of that bullshit, the news. I would just go to sleep, wake up the next morning, go grab some chains, and start pulling trees. Well, after, I don't know, 6, 8, 9 months of that, I had everything pretty much cleared, and now I had a bunch of stumps I had to deal with. I'm talking hundreds, probably, I don't know, probably 800, 900 stumps. And so we got a big old excavator in there instead and started ripping them out. And now we have beautiful pastures. And one day I walked out on the porch and I saw the trees that go down into the swamp behind our house. Not swamp, but the low area back there. And I go, man, we need a pond. And I would look good. So I called up this guy, Mark. He actually just called me before you. And I said, hey, man, I said, what's it going to take to dig a 4-acre pond? I said, I got this like 4-acre spot of trees that I don't really like looking at anymore. And he goes, well, if you're trying to spend about, $50,000 to $75,000, I said, no, I said, I ain't trying to do that. He goes, let me come look. We found this nice little 2-acre spot, and he came out and cleared it and started digging. And he shaped it up real nicely, and we let that cure for about 6 months because it's clay. Not to get into what you got to do, but you got to let that clay harden so it forms a nice bowl to retain the water so it won't pass through. And now that fucking pond is filling up, and it's gorgeous. It's all grass covered now, and here we are. And now I'm about to build a barn, another
one. On the Fire Rescue Wellness podcast, it's very important to me to talk about dogs. Mm-hmm. And I know you have a dog, but also I want to talk dogs and donkeys. Let's hear it.
So we have 3 dogs. One, her name is Fancy. We rescued her when she was 6 weeks old from a local shelter. That's my girl. She's actually sleeping on the bed next to me right now. Then we have Pearl, which I call Pearl Cream. She's a Dachshund. And we nicknamed her Pearl Cream because I don't know if you remember from the 1980s, there was an old, I think her name was Susie Kwan. She was an Asian lady. And she did a commercial on Asian beauty and how Asians appear so young. And she goes, do you want to know ancient Chinese secret on how Asian women stay so youthful? And she goes, we use ancient secret called Pearl Cream. And as soon as my wife got this dog and named her Pearl, I remembered that fucking commercial. And now her name's Pearl Cream. So that's stick. Then my dad, I was doing my tour, actually went through Hilton Head, South Carolina one time for Hilton Head Fire Department. And when I was leaving, my dad's dog had just passed. And I said, let's go by the shelter and look at dogs. We walk in there and I see this old hunting dog, not old, she's about 6. And we see this damn, what we call a coon dog. And we saw her in there. And man, she was beautiful. She had a nice temperament. She was so sweet. Her name was Miss Priss. And I said, shit, Dad, I'm getting this dog for you. He's like, no, don't get that dog for me. I don't need no damn dog, and blah, 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 blah. So I bought him the dog, took her to his house. He didn't like the dog because she wouldn't go on walks with him. She's an old coon dog. She just wants to lay up in the sun. So my wife said something about, y'all can bring the dog to us. We'll take it. Damn, if he didn't drive 2 hours up here and he dropped the damn dog off. So now we have 3 dogs. And she's amazing. And now we named her Old June. And she goes out to the farm. She chases deer. She chases coons, possums, cats. She's just all over the place all day. She's living her best life. So you got them. And you want to know about donkeys. I'll tell everybody out there, get yourself a donkey, a miniature donkey. You don't get a full-size donkey. They're too big to take places.
Wait, did you say take places? Where would you take a donkey?
You should take him to dinner. It's like a therapy donkey. You take him in the Home Depot. You know? I saw a damn dude walk up. He walked this dog in the Lowe's the other day. And I don't like seeing that shit. Like, I get it, man, but if it's a therapy dog, that's one thing. But just because you just want to bring your dog to Lowe's, like, come on, bro. Like, anyway, I saw him and I was like, man, I should bring one of my damn donkeys up here. Little Eeyore, he's the king of my ranch. And I was like, I'm going to take him up there one day. But anyway, we started getting donkeys because I saw one on a farm, a little miniature donkey one time. And they're just the cutest, most docile creature in the world. And we went to an auction, and damn if there weren't 3 of them there, a little family of donkeys. And I heard this lady over talking that she was going to get the donkeys and resell them and split them up so she could make money. She's essentially going to flip them. And when I heard her say that, I looked at my wife and I go, that ain't happening. We're going to buy these donkeys. I don't care how much they cost. And I overpaid like a son of a bitch for these donkeys. We had an auction. And I remember it was so obnoxious what I paid for these donkeys. I won't even tell you. I walked outside, and the dude actually that was running the auction came out to check on me. He says, man, you all right? Country as shit. And I said, yeah, I'm good. Why? And he goes, you realize how much you just paid for them donkeys? I go, I do. And he goes, that was stupid. And I said, why? He goes, you overpaid for them things by a mile. He goes, nobody pays that kind of money for donkeys. And I had my 2 daughters standing right there. And I go, I wasn't about to let that lady take these donkeys from these 2 little girls. I said, so whatever it costs, it costs. And he just kind of looked at me, tipped his hat, and walked off. I was like, motherfucker, don't come insult me. Anyway, so long story, we got the donkeys, and they got babies up there now, and it's all beautiful. But one day we go back to the auction, and we hadn't been back since the donkey day, okay? And I'm a pretty recognizable guy, especially up there, because I stand out a little bit when at the auction, I'll just say that. And when I went back up there, the dude looked at me and like, oh shit, this guy's back. And I did the same damn thing with a cow and a bull. And the guy just started shaking his head. And I walked out, had my cow and I had my bull, put on a trailer and brought to my farm. Fuck him.
Oh my God. Also, donkey flipping sounds like a really awesome career.
So apparently you can get for a purebred, like if you get it, you can go look them up when we're done. Go look, and I don't know, the price may have changed, but they were like $3,500 per donkey if you do the whole bloodline thing, because people breed them and papers and all. My donkeys are trashy, like we're like white trash donkeys. We don't do the whole papers and all that. They're just illegitimate donkeys, and we're pets, and we ain't breeding them. We're keeping them where they are. When they die there, they go in the ground there, kind of thing. Same with my bull and my heifer that we have. And when they have a little youngin', we're going to same thing. We're just going to keep them out there. We give them all names. The bull's name is Ragnar. He's a Scottish Highland cow, like the little ones with all the hair. And then Georgia, she's Black Angus. She's taller. And Ragnar, when he wants to make love to her, he's so short he can't even get up to her. So, I don't know how they're going to do that, but
I think a hill is probably going to be involved, some sort of a high ground.
Yeah, I'll have to build him like a little step ladder out there or something.
I think so. Well, Travis, this conversation has been hilarious, which I expected, but I do want to be respectful of your time. So I'm going to ask you, do you have any parting words, a message you want to leave the listeners with regarding mental health and families?
You know, I don't know. I don't want to give people advice that aren't out seeking advice kind of thing, but I will tell you this. It's just something to chew on, something to think about. When when you're at the end of your life, and I know this, I don't want it to sound cliche, are you going to be proud of the results? Are you going to be proud of the decisions that you made? And are you going to be proud of the hurdles that you overcame? And ask yourself what the cost was. Is you having a career that you absolutely think you love, but you know it's destroying your family and it's destroying you in the process? What's the cost of that at the end of it? Because I tell people these career paths that we have, man, they are some of the best careers out there as far as excitement and thrill and a sense of purpose goes. But we also got to look at what they do to us. And if it's doing something to you, either one, get right so you can have longevity with it, or two, get out of it so you can have longevity with your life and your family. But don't do it unhealthily, if that's even a word. Don't be unhealthy doing it, is if it's impacting other people. I fear that there's so many people out there going through what I once was, and that utterly just breaks my heart. It doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't. You can put in the work, you can to arrive at a better place, but it takes understanding, especially in a relationship from both sides. It takes open line of communication to get there. Communication is a two-way street, not one. And it takes a lot of understanding, compassion, and patience. If you don't have any of that, you're not going to get there, you know. So I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Absolutely. It all goes back to that self-awareness and that ability to be vulnerable, which feels icky. Vulnerability feels icky.
It does, and it's. I think it's one of the hardest things a human being can experience because we just naturally don't want to expose ourselves to people. Privacy is everything to us, and certain things I think should be left private. But when you can figure out a way to let some of that go and let people in and let some of the shit that you've been holding inside of yourself go, and I mean truly let it go. There are things that I won't even look back on anymore. I don't wonder what if, because I know now. I'm just like, you know what? I've moved on with my life in a positive manner. I'm not revisiting that. It didn't do any good for me, and I've grown from it, and here I am. Now what? Next step. So
I like that. Next step.
next step.
Well, Travis, this has been a pleasure. I was looking forward to this. Thank you so much for taking the time. And
Absolutely.
I think we can drop the mic. What do you think?
Yeah, let's drop it. You drop it.
You drop it.
I'll drop
There
them.
we go.
You drop it.
All right. It's dropped. Have a great day, Travis.
You too.